Good evening. I'm Chris Naylor, the Executive for Research Services here at the National Archives, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program honoring the 80th anniversary of the Allied victory in the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German campaign on the Western Front during World War II. While the official anniversary of the battle will take place next month, today's program is a fitting way to commemorate Veterans Day by highlighting the heroic stories of two veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, Harry Miller and Colonel Frank Cohn. We are honored to have them join us and to hear their stories today. The National Archives' mission is to preserve and share the records we hold that document our nation's story, including U.S. military records from World War II and every other major conflict in our nation's history. With less than 1% of World War II veterans still with us, it is more crucial than ever that we share their stories and ensure they're never forgotten. We are excited to be able to share a few of our records from the Battle of the Bulge with you tonight in a special display just outside the McGowan Theater. And if you haven't had a chance to see these documents, I encourage you to view them after tonight's program. We will also be holding a book signing with this evening's moderator and best-selling author, Alex Kershaw. Please be sure to stop by and thank Harry and Colonel Cohn for their service. And we have partnered tonight with Friends of the National World War II Memorial for this program. And I'd now like to welcome Jane Dropa, Chair of the Board of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial. Thank you. Jane?
Thank you. Good evening. On behalf of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, I'd like to thank the National Archives for co-hosting tonight's Battle of the Bulge 80th anniversary program. It's an honor to gather here and remember the heroes of this pivotal battle. As chair of Friends, I'm privileged to introduce two exceptional veterans. Mr. Harry Miller, who fought in the Battle of the Bulge with the U.S. Army's 740th Tank Battalion, was just 16 years old. He continued to serve in the Army in Korea, and then in Vietnam, he served with the U.S. Air Force. Retiring in 1966 as a senior master sergeant. Today, Harry can often be found at the World War II Memorial, where he generously shares stories of his service with visitors of all ages. Retired Army Colonel Frank Cohn, who escaped Nazi Germany as a child and then returned as a U.S. soldier, served in the Battle of the Bulge and met the Russians at the Elbe River. He later served as Sergeant of the Guard for Nazi prisoners prosecuted at the Second Nuremberg trial. His 35-year military career included service in Korea and Vietnam. And now, I'm pleased to hand the program over to Friends of the National World War II resident historian, Alex Kershaw. Alex is the author of numerous books about World War II, including New York Times bestsellers, The Longest Winter, and his newest book, Patton's Prayer. His works bring World War II history to life. Thank you, Alex, for leading tonight's discussion.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. I'm delighted to see such numbers, and I want to offer a sincere thank you from friends for you both being here. I'm extremely honored to be sat on a stage with two extraordinary Americans and warriors, veterans of the deadliest battle of World War II and the last great battle on the Western Front. Could I ask you a favor, guys? Could we have a round of applause for these two amazing people? So we have 16 million Americans served in World War II, and there are less than 100,000 with us still breathing. So this evening is an extraordinary moment for all of us to be able to talk to you two gentlemen about perhaps the most impactful last big battle of World War II. Harry, I'm going to start with you, sir. Okay. Your youth, how on earth did you end up seeing combat as a 16-year-old 80 years ago?
Wasn't easy. I always wanted to be a soldier when I was a little kid on up. And I knew a man in the neighborhood, and he knew me, and he knew that I wanted to go in the Army. One day he saw me on the street, and he says, "Hey, you still want to go in the Army?" I said, "I'd love to go in the Army." He said, "Well, go down and see the Army recruiter. He's taking people in at 17 and a half." And I said, "Oh, good, okay." The man didn't know how old I was. Thank God. And so anyway, I went down to the recruiter, and he says, "Yeah." I said, "I'll take you in." He said, "You are 17 and a half." I said, "Oh, yeah." And he said, "Well, you have to have a birth certificate." So I said, "Well, I don't have one." He said, "Well," he told me how to get one. So I went down to the county office, and in those days, they had a big ledger book. And the woman wrote my name in there, normally wrote my name in there, but she didn't write my name. So I didn't have a birth certificate. So I took it back to the recruiter and says I couldn't get one. I said, "Does that mean I can't go in?" He said, "No." I said, "I'll take it." He said, "It happens a lot of times." And it did in those days. You know, babies were born on kitchen tables and people never got the paperwork done. So anyway, he said, "Yeah, I can still take it." He said, "You are 17 and a half. "Oh, yeah." And so he took me, and that's how I got in.
Colonel Cohn, tell us about your youth, because it was unique and it was something that profoundly affected you and to this day still stays with you. You were born in Germany as a German Jew.
Right.
Tell us more about that.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1925.
Don't believe you.
I was the only child in a middle-class family that was doing rather well. We had a sporting goods store, and that did it. We had a live-in maid in those days who was dedicated to taking care of the house. And when I came along, they even hired another girl to take care of me. Everything was hunky-dory until 1933 when Mr. Hitler took over the government. And it was an immediate situation for us because they started to demonstrate in front of our store that Germans should not buy from Jews. And my father recognized that this was going to be a losing proposition, and he sold the store, which was a good thing because the store was no longer an anchor when we had to leave. And we had to leave in 1938 because my father had run out of options to economically sustain the family. And he had some distant relatives in the States. He took a visitor's visa to get to the States to find his relatives so that they could give him an affidavit for us to emigrate. And the affidavit also indicates that we should never be a burden to the government. Well, he found the relatives, but they were not in a position because of the depression at the time. They didn't have enough money to sustain a guarantee that we would not become a burden because they would have to advance all the money that we needed. So he had to stay longer to see if he could find someone to give him an affidavit. And while that seemed like a catastrophe at the time, it was a good luck thing because when he stayed longer, he evaded the Gestapo that came to our door looking for him. And when my mother told them that he was on an international business trip, she was instructed that he must report to Gestapo headquarters the minute that he came back to Germany. So she wrote my father to stay where he was, and she took off to the consulate in Breslau, where we were born, where I was born, and got herself a visitor's visa as well. And the next day, completely out of character, she went back and bribed somebody to put me on that same visa. And it was easy because we were on the same passport. Well, we ended up in New York on the 30th November, 1938. On the 9th of November, on the 30th of October, 1938. On the 9th of November was Crystal Night, the pogrom against the Jews that the Nazis implemented on that date. And we were worried about all our relatives, but we had escaped it. And it was even more of a miracle for us because President Roosevelt issued an executive order that indicated that nobody would be forced to return to Germany, which meant our visas were extended indefinitely and we were saved.
I've read somewhere that you believe that you are sitting here today because of Roosevelt.
Absolutely.
Tell us more.
I owe the country. I always owe the country. And this is payback. This is still payback when I come and talk about the pogroms and what happened, what the Nazis did during the Holocaust. This is all part of my required payback.
Harry, tell us about how you ended up being in the 740th Tank Battalion in the Battle of the Bulge.
Well, I finished basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and was sent to Fort Ord, California. And as it turned out, I was sent there to help them break up and become a tractor battalion at the 788th Tank Battalion. And they renamed them a tractor battalion. I never heard of it. To this day, I don't know where they got that name. But anyway, what it was they had landing craft, what they called landing craft mechanized, at LVTs, landing vehicle track, I'll get it. So anyway, we put these LVTs on railroad flat cars and took them to the port of New York and pulled up next to the ship, and they loaded the vehicles onto the ships, and away we went. So we went to Le Havre. It's Le Havre actually, but all the GIs called it Le Havre. So in memory of them, I'll say Le Havre. But anyway, you know, that happened in World War I as well, not just World War II. Everybody called it Le Havre. And so I got there, and we put the vehicles on flat cars again and took them to the port of Antwerp, Belgium. The reason we went there is because General Eisenhower had given General Montgomery of England, no offense, and
None taken.
he told him.
I'm not a fan either, Harry.
He told him that he wanted him to get this port cleared because they wanted to bring supplies into Antwerp instead of over the beaches of Normandy, because we were getting close to the border of Germany, and it was getting to be a long haul all the way from Normandy into the Belgian area. So anyway, Montgomery convinced him he should have the market garden operation, which didn't turn out to be the way everybody thought it might. And so anyway, when he got back, Eisenhower said, now, there you got your landing vehicles, now I want you to get this damn port cleared up now. So he said, okay. So they went busy, and the trouble was the port was at the bottom of the Scheldt estuary, which was an 83-mile estuary, in other words, a river practically coming into the port. And the Germans held the other one side of it, and the British and the Canadians held the other side. And they couldn't go across because every time they tried to bring a ship in, the Germans would load up on them. And so They finally got across, and they started bringing the supplies in. And meanwhile, I went back to the cigarette camps. And a lot of people don't know what the cigarette camps are, but if you want me to go into that. The cigarette camps were a temporary tent camp, 3 of them. They were named after the famous cigarettes of the time, Old Gold, Philip Morris, and Lucky Strike. I went to Old Gold. And one day they picked me up, me and about 4 of us, I guess. They picked us up in a 6x6 truck, took us to the town of Neufchâteau, Belgium, which was just about 15 miles east of Liège. And that's where the 740th was. And I found out that I was a stranger there because the original members were mostly Texans and Okies. And anybody that's ever been to Texas or Oklahoma knows that the 2 of them are continually at each other. Not necessarily roughneck, but only when the football game is played. But they get along fun-wise.
Colonel Cohn, do you remember the outbreak of the Battle of the Bulge? Where were you? What did you know at the time about this battle?
Well, the thing was that there was utter confusion at the time. Nobody knew what was going on. The rumors were flying around that there were parachutists, they were shooting around where we were, but I have no idea what they were shooting at because the enemy wasn't there yet.
Right.
Well, it was a very scary time. I recall I was given a rifle and a flashlight and told to go to a small dirt access road and make sure don't let any Germans come in. So I get in the middle of the road and I stand there and a vehicle comes and I halt and the driver asks, well, what the heck are you doing there? I said, I'm making sure you're not a German. She said, if I was a German, you'd be dead. Get in the ditch over there. I get in the ditch over there. I thought there was a good point that he had. I am in the ditch. The next vehicle comes. I yell, halt, halt, halt. They don't hear me. They go right by. I'm not doing my job. Now, what am I supposed to do? I'm up, I'm down. I don't know what to do. Thank goodness around midnight, they called us in for a blackout move towards Antwerp. Antwerp. Yeah. And we also found out later that the German target was Antwerp. They wanted to get that port, but neither the Germans nor us ever got to Antwerp. We got to Namur, and in Namur we received orders to look for German infiltrators, 4 in a Jeep, who had, in American uniforms, come through the lines, and they were doing nasty things in back of the, well, it was in our lines, of course. And we started to circulate throughout Belgium, Namur, Dinant, Rochefort, Ciney, Remouchon, all these towns. Well, it seems like an easy type of thing, but it was miserable. It was cold, and it was either snowing or sleeting or freezing rain or drizzle, and it was just miserably cold in a Jeep with the windshield down, going 25 miles an hour. It was very, very rough. You had to have the windshield down. You can't shoot through a windshield. And I was just a PFC, so I was in the back seat, and the captain was in front of me, and I was getting at least some relief from the captain, which I never told him, of course. Anyway, I was in a poncho, which is a sort of rubbery type of cape, and while it stopped the wind a little bit, it didn't stop the cold. And to this day, whenever I take a bath, because I was finally, after the Bulge, able to go to Liège for a shower for 20 minutes. In that shower, everybody yelled, "Get out of there!" And I wouldn't go. To this day, I enjoy my bath because I never had a bath during those times, not even a shower. And I'm happy, and I always remember the Battle of the Bulge.
I want to give you guys just a little bit of context about the battle itself, so we can position you and talk about your actions more specifically. 16th of December, a massive surprise attack on the Western Front. Hitler's aim is to end the war in the West on his terms rather than ours. We are demanding unconditional surrender. 200,000 German troops get to the Allied front lines, the so-called sleepy corner, the ghost corner of a very long, broad front, and take us completely by surprise. There is panic, chaos. Many, many GIs are fleeing. It is a complete disaster. Eisenhower, Bradley, others are in a crisis situation. And for 2 or 3 days, no one knows really what will be the outcome of Hitler's last great gamble on the Western Front. Let's come back to you, Colonel Cohn, before I move over to Harry again. How did you end up being in intelligence in the Battle of the Bulge?
That's a good question.
It's my only good question.
I started out as an infantry replacement, and I was in the 87th Infantry Division at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and they were assessed infantry replacements to get overseas immediately because we had a lot of casualties in the invasion. So I took off as a replacement leaving the division. I went to England and spent about 3 weeks there as an infantry replacement, then to France another week, and then into Belgium another week or so, and then they found out I spoke German. And they decided they needed German linguists more than that they needed infantry. So I went back to Le Vesnay near Paris and had a 2-week course in intelligence, which made me an intelligence agent, fully trained, all raring to go, and no more PFC stripe. I took that off. It was US, and I joined a team of 6 people, 2 officers, 2 interpreters, a driver, and a sergeant in charge. Well, the officers and the interpreters wore only US, no rank. And the driver, he was a specialist. And whenever I was with the driver, I ordered him around because he didn't know what my rank was. He outranked me. Anyway, we were attached after my placement in the team, interrogator prisoner of war team number 66. We got attached to T-Force, 12th Army Group. This is a intelligence unit, over 100 people, all trained intelligence agents, some well-trained like me, and others maybe a little bit better trained. Anyway, we got back into Belgium, and we ended up in Belgium on the 10th of December 1944. On the 16th of December, the Battle of the Bulge started, and that's when we had the worst night in all that confusion.
Do you remember the barrage that preceded the attack? I mean, it was the greatest barrage launched by the Germans on Allied lines in World War II in the European theater. Do you remember the sound of that, the impact of that initial barrage?
Well, I came into the Utah Beach 3 months after the invasion as an infantry replacement. And first of all, I never got my feet wet because they had built a small little dock by then. But the field was littered with all the catastrophic things that happened on that beach. You could tell that that was a terrible battle. It was just terrible. All kinds of equipment that was wiped out, and it was still in the beaches. So we really got an appreciation of what we missed.
Right. I should add that in the first few days after the German attack, Otto Skorzeny, the famous SS commando,
Yes.
he and a bunch of paratroopers infiltrated American lines in American uniform, and those were the guys that you were looking for. It must have been quite interesting, given that you are a German, and your accent, I assume, was fairly Teutonic back then, shall I say?
We never really intercepted anyone, but when we came to Namur, when we came to Dinant, there was an infantry roadblock, and they had caught one of those teams just minutes before, and they had wiped them out with a bazooka. I'm not sure exactly what made them certain that they were the enemy, because they were in American uniforms, but they didn't know the password. That was one thing, and perhaps in the further discussions they figured out with the accents they had, they wiped them out with a bazooka. So we knew this was a legitimate mission.
Right.
And we searched the bodies, and we found dog tags on them. They had dog tags, but we turned that in because they were either killed Americans or POWs. But that was the only intelligence value we found. They had explosives, they had maps, but nothing of intelligence value.
Meanwhile, Eisenhower is under enormous pressure. He's at Versailles, 24-hour guard, guards pacing back and forth on top of his headquarters. He's very claustrophobic, and everyone is thinking that Scorsese and the guys that you're supposed to stop headed to Paris to kill him.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true. Well, the mission was obviously legitimate, and I can't tell you what kind of damage they did, but I know they blew things up, and they switched signs around to provide confusion and things of that nature, and they were harmful teams in back of our lines. And I'm sorry we never found one.
Harry, tell us about life in a tank during the Battle of the Bulge. What do you remember most about?
Colder than, I can't describe it. It was so cold, and of course we had to, you know, tanks have hatches. Normally, in the movies and some of the newsreels, you see the hatches closed, and you can't tell there's a person in there. But in our outfit, we found out that the best thing to do is go into combat with the hatches open. Number one, so you could get out faster. But number two, we taught everybody in our organization to always have your eyes looking up, down, left, and right. Always, continually. By the way, we pointed out, it does remind you of the sign of the cross, which scared the devil out of most of us because people think of a cross at a grave, you know. But anyway, that's what we did. We kept the hatches open, and four eyes looking out of the tank would be up and down, left and right, up and down, looking to make sure there was no anti-tank guns around. And occasionally, you would find a tank sitting under a mound of hay at a farm. And we found out that sometimes these tanks were underneath that hay, and they would wait till you got by and they'd fire at you and try to knock you out. Well, so what we would do if we saw a pile of hay like that, we'd shoot a few machine gun bullets into it, and if they ricocheted, we knew there was something down there, under there besides hay. And that was a continual look. It was continual. And it was so cold when you were moving, with the air coming in those hatches, going through the tank and right up through the turret. And it was just so cold, wet, damp, and foggy. It was so hard to see because the fog was one thing that was really bad. You couldn't see very few feet in front of you, but you had to keep your eyes open because if you didn't, it meant you were going to get hit by an anti-tank gun. So that was it.
What did you do on Christmas Day, 1944? Both of you. Harry first. Do you remember
I got
Christmas Day,
colder.
1944?
I got colder. Well, we really didn't get our combat gear or our suits. They called them, well, they started out, they were called tanker suits, but the infantry liked them too, and so they demanded that they get them as well as we should. But the problem was the armored divisions got them, but us being a separate tank battalion attached to an infantry division, we were the last guys on the list. So we still had just our plain old OD uniforms with long johns hopefully underneath them, and a pair of OD pants over a pair of fatigue pants and sweaters and shirts and everything you had underneath that with an overcoat on. Trying to get in and out of a tank with an overcoat on, it's terrible. And so we went through Christmas without winter gear. And I remember that very, very clearly. But otherwise, I didn't know it was Christmas until somebody told me, because, of course, I didn't have a calendar with me. And that was the day we had been with the 30th Infantry Division. But on that day, we went with the 82nd Airborne Division, which was the best day of our lives, because the 82nd Airborne, I hope there's somebody here that was in it, because it was the best damned outfit in the Army. And I'll tell you, it still is. They're great guys, and they liked us too, because we saved a lot of them, but they were just great guys. And we really had a good time after we joined them, because they were a bunch of hard fighters. They were a great group. And that's the thing we still are proud, well, I say still, until everybody died but me in the battalion. We used to talk about the 82nd Airborne at our reunions. We just loved them.
Colonel Cohn, what's your memory of Christmas 1944?
Well, you know, we had a whole week of miserable weather, and Christmas came, and suddenly the sky became blue, and the sun came out, and we looked, and our planes started to fly, and we cheered those planes because we knew that was going to switch the outcome of the battle, and certainly it did. Now, they might not have heard us, but we were cheering so loud, maybe they did.
Patton's famous prayer for good weather, had been answered.
Yes.
Clear skies meant that our one massive advantage, air power, could be deployed for the first time since the 16th of December.
Yeah.
What are your abiding memories, both of you? I'm going to start with you, Colonel Cohn, of the sharp end of combat.
What?
Of combat.
The combat?
What do you remember most today?
Well, our mission was to go into big cities right after the infantry, and we had building targets and personality targets. Buildings, anything that was going to be used by the occupying force, by us, and personality targets were the war criminals. So one of the first cities, well, the first one was Cologne, but the next one, well, let me talk about Cologne. Cologne was right on the Rhine River, and the Nazis, when we came, the Nazis and the government officials all went across and tried to blow up all the bridges. One of them didn't quite blow, the Ludendorff Bridge, which we later had crossed, but that was another story. One of the primary priority targets was a military concern, an installation, a military installation, and we got there, and we got into the building, and you could see the Germans had evacuated in a real hurry. The only thing we found in that building that was live was a canary bird. We went up and looked at the canary bird. He was chirping away, and we were admiring him, and suddenly a mortar round came across the Rhine River. They had seen our Jeep. We dashed to the Jeep and took off. The first round had been over, and the way the mortars go, the next round was short, And lucky it was short, because otherwise they would have gotten us. And then we pulled away, and the third round was right there where the Jeep had been parked. Now that gave me a completely different outlook on the war. It wasn't the artillery, which you had to undergo many times, but that was impersonal. You just had to be lucky not to be there. This one, they were trying to kill me. And I had a completely different outlook about the battle when that thing happened.
In what way? What fundamentally changed for you in terms of your attitude toward the enemy?
Well, first of all, I became a little more cautious.
Right.
And whenever we were any place that we could have been observed, I remember how they found the Jeep. So I was always very cautious and didn't want to get into that kind of condition again. So you learn in the battle as to how to preserve yourself, because nobody else really worries about you that much except yourself.
Good point. Harry, I mean, how did you survive the Battle of the Bulge? Spiritually, physically, how did you get through that battle?
I think just strictly dumb luck.
Dumb luck.
I think so. I've often asked myself the same question, just like, why am I the last one of the battalion to be alive? Dumb luck is all I can name it. But I was scared all the time, but I looked around, and old men of 28, 29 years old, those old guys, they were scared too. So I figured, well, if they were scared, then I should really be scared. But come find out, we were all equal. We were all the same bucket, the same, waiting for the same thing. And hopefully our people that worked with us would protect us as we would protect them. That was the main thing. Other than that, you asked what the hardest day was. The hardest days, I would say the taking of the Siegfried line. The Siegfried line, a lot of people think the Siegfried line is just these dragon's teeth that you see sticking out of the ground that look like teeth, but they're actually concrete, reinforced concrete. Some of them are so big and others are great big, and they come up about so high, and they were made by the Germans and the French during the 30s when tanks weren't very, very impressive. But with our tanks, which today are not very impressive, but in those days is all we had. But we did have some with a bulldozer blade on the front, so that if we had problems getting into a machine gun or a bullet or a artillery piece in a concrete, what do you call the darn things?
Bunker.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, bunker.
Yeah. Anyway, well, you had to get them two ways. Either the infantry had to get them by walking up to the embrasures where the guns were sticking out and throw in hand grenades or whatever they had, or the tanks could sit back and shoot and possibly knock it out by putting a round into the embrasure where the German tanks guns are sitting. That was the difficult part, but it was a very difficult battle, because not only did you have problems getting over the dragon's teeth, but then what we would do, we'd have a bulldozer type tank push dirt on them, and we could just ride right over them. But after you got into the Siegfried line itself, you'd find, I'll give you an example. There would be a bunker sitting here, and it would have an anti-tank gun in it with 3 to 8 feet of concrete, reinforced concrete on both sides, all sides, and the roof. And that one gun sitting there by itself was dangerous. But they had another same thing over here and another one over here. And then these on the outsides, they had the same setup on theirs. So they were sitting, hard to do it, like that. And so each one was protecting the other one. So you had a difficult time getting to them, And if you couldn't hit them with artillery from distance, then the infantry had to take over and take it by actually hand to hand. And that was tough, very tough. The 82nd Airborne people told us that that was the toughest battle they had been in. And now these guys went through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, Normandy, and Holland, and then the Battle of the Bulge, and that was the toughest battle they said that they had been in. And it was no simple thing.
So Harry, where were you when the war ended? 7th of May, 1945. Where were you?
We had gotten up to the Baltic. We had orders to go up and help the British. We didn't know why we should do that, because the British were doing okay, and the war was winding down. But we didn't find out until after the war that we went up there to have a show of force to the Russians, because the Russians were coming in from the east, and so we were blocking the Russians so that the Russians couldn't go over and take Denmark. We didn't find out about that until after the war. They didn't inform us about that at all. But anyway, we ended up at Schwerin, the town of Schwerin on the Baltic, and we had a ceremony there. Just first of all, I think we just all collapsed. Just about everybody just fell down and slept, no matter where they were. It was warm, it was nice, it was May 8th, and it was just such a reward to be able to just lay down and sleep and just leave me alone. And that's exactly what they did, thank God. They were smart enough to just leave us alone and let us get through it. And then we didn't stay there long. They sent us down to our occupation areas.
So the 16th of December, 1944, the battle begins. 16th of January, 1945, the 70-mile penetration, the Bulge in the Allied lines is erased. Early February, you guys are pushing toward the Rhine. We cross on the 7th of March at the Ludendorff Bridge. Nazi Germany starts to collapse. Sir, you're a German Jew and you're looking for Nazis. Was that a mission that you enjoyed at the end of the war?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us more.
There was one incident, for example, in Frankfurt, where we arrived in Frankfurt, and they had captured a lot of general officers. And instead of doing our first priority target, we were told at least interrogate these people just to find out whether they might have more intelligence value to be interrogated in depth later on, or if we can discard them and put them in a POW camp. Now, I recall one Major General of the Waffen-SS standing in front of me and saluting me. Of course, he didn't know I was just a PFC because I had US. Neither did he know that I was Jewish, but he was saluting, and I enjoyed that immensely. And I asked him for his name, and he said it was August Wilhelm von Hohenzollern. Von Hohenzollern was the aristocracy. I knew that from my German experience. And I also knew when he said his first and second name, this was Prince Auvi, the Kaiser's proud crown prince.
Oh.
And
You
I
hooked a
thought
big
that
fish
was
there.
pretty good that I recognized that. And I immediately stopped the interrogation, went to my captain and said, I got a big one here for you. I said, who do you got? I got the crown prince, the son of the Kaiser. That was the last I ever saw of Prince Auvi. They took him away for further interrogation.
So over 18,000 Americans killed 80 years almost ago in the Battle of the Bulge, the deadliest battle of World War II for Americans. Something like 140,000 Americans killed to liberate Europe from the 408,000 killed during World War II. Do you look back today, both of you, and believe that you were part of what Eisenhower called a great crusade? Do you believe that you were part of a liberating force that was defeating evil?
I do. I'm very, very proud, especially when I look at those white crosses and Jewish stars on the cemeteries, that's tough. It's tough to look at them. I sometimes think of the people that are there. I see them as GIs, dirty GIs, unshaven, dirty as the devil, cold, miserable, worn out boots, shoes, what have you. And that's the kind of people I see there. Instead of crosses, I see that. That's tough to take. That is tough.
Well, we didn't know how bad it was. We knew it was bad, though, and we knew there were lots of casualties because too many times when we were probing throughout Belgium, we were stopped by the roadblocks because the battle was going on right in front, and you could see the ambulances coming back towards with all the wounded. And when you see so many wounded, you know they're more dead than wounded, probably. And that's why we were so enthused when the weather changed and we saw our airplanes coming. And I didn't recognize how really bad it was until much later.
When did you find out about the Holocaust?
Not until I got home,
Tell us
after the
more.
war.
Tell us more.
Because you forget about these things. Even the worst battles, you forget about it. You put that out of your mind and you just focus on what's ahead. You look in the future, you don't look back. And looking back only happened after I got back to the States.
Right. Harry, when did you first start to talk about your experiences in World War II?
When did I stop talking about
When did you start? When was the
start.
first time you started?
I was going to say never. But anyway, I don't know. I think back now and I just can't remember. I know when during the occupation, I stayed there for 3 years after the war because I wanted to see Europe. I'd been there and helped free it. I wanted to go and see it while I was there. So I can remember a lot of the guys did that. And I was in several units right after the war. And we would get together when we weren't chasing girls. We'd get in a big circle. We'd talk about things that happened. Somebody would start one off, oh, the damnedest thing happened to me at such and such a place. And this German was coming at me and I did this and the other thing. And that, oh, that reminds me. And then the next guy would tell a story, and then the next. And I think that helped us get out of that, at least get it out of our minds. I believe the men that went back fast, or wanted to get back as quick as they could, because they had family, kids, what have you, you know. And I believe a lot of those guys suffered much more than we did because they went from a warfare to peace and quiet, trying to raise kids. And they didn't want their kids to know that they had to kill people. They didn't want their kids to think that they were murderers. Not like in Vietnam when people in this country called their own soldiers baby killers, that type of thing. But we didn't have to go through that because we talked it out among ourselves. And the guys that came home, I think that they probably went into the bathroom, locked the door, turned on all the spigots, and cried their eyes out. And I think others would go down the basement at the workbench and bang around with a hammer or something, and they would do the same thing. They'd be crying their eyes out because they wouldn't talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it and make their own kids and their wives think that they were murderers.
I think we have a little bit of time left. Does anybody have any questions? If anybody would like to ask a question, that would be wonderful. Yeah, if you go to the microphones either side. There's a microphone here and there's a microphone over here. When we finish, by the way, in about 10 minutes, these two amazing gentlemen are going to join me for a book signing. So if you'd like to chat with them and continue, please do so. But if we have any questions, that would be great. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. And you truly are heroes to me. What you've done is incredible. Your generation. Recently, in recent times, there's been denials of Holocaust and people minimizing what's going on, what happened in the war and the tremendous things you did. What message will you give to the younger generations to help them remember the heroic things you did and how you literally saved democracy?
Colonel Cohn, I'm gonna roughly translate that for you because I know that he's a long way away. What are the lessons that we can learn from World War II? And he added that there is a lot of Holocaust denial these days. What's your answer to that? Holocaust denial, and then what specifically are the lessons that we can learn from what you guys saw and what you stopped? Because let's not forget that what you did was also to stop the Holocaust.
Yeah. Well, of course, the only thing that can stop it is the truth. And the truth has to be told. And this is a type of gathering where the truth can come out. When I was over there, I didn't know how bad that concentration camp killing was. I did not understand that this was all an organized process with all the bureaucracy involved, and that they were methodically killing people by in poison chambers, and then hiding what they had done by burning all the bodies in those ovens that we found. Now, I never came to liberate a concentration camp. We liberated a Polish labor camp and Ukrainian workers, but that wasn't the same. So I never had a picture of really how bad it was until I got back to the States. Now, this is what's important. You have to have people who have witnessed this thing have to tell what it is that they saw, and they would have to be called a liar rather than have a denial of this kind of thing. And it's when you meet the hate that was coming, that was necessary, and you see the hate that is going on in some of these universities, it's a terrible thing. I could see the same type of hate that comes through, and if it isn't stopped, it gets into the government, and once the government starts to hate, that's when you have the big problem. Thank God for our government. And I'm not talking about the Democrats, I'm not talking about the Republicans, I'm talking about our government. Our government is clean in that regard. If they ever get the haters into the government, then God forbid us. Anything can happen.
Do we have another question from someone?
A question from one of our online viewers who, first of all, wants to thank both of you for your service and also wants to know if you could talk a little bit about what it was like to go into the post-war part of your lives, going home and resuming your lives after the war, the challenges, the joys, you know, those sorts of things.
Harry, in 1 minute or less, after the war, because we know what happened to you. You left the U.S. Army, and then you joined the Air Force.
Well, that
so we want to know, when are you going to join the Navy?
that was later. I wasn't trying to cover my tracks, really. I couldn't possibly have done that. No, I just happened to be put into a unit that I got disgusted with it. This was during the Cold War, and we were listening to the Russians, and they were listening to us, and we were trying to get at each other's secrets, of course. And this unit that I was in, I got so disgusted with the personnel that were working on it, because I found out that if you're in a combat unit is infantry, armor, artillery, engineers. If you're in a unit like that, and then you put into something like ordnance or quartermaster or signal corps, you think these guys aren't even in the same army I'm in. Your thinking is completely different. I took it as much as I could until one day the detachment commander came to work. He had a big black eye. And one of the captains that was in the unit, I could talk to him without any problem. He was a nice guy. I asked him, I said, what on earth happened to the major? Oh, he got into an altercation with the captain so-and-so last night, and the guy hit him. And I told him, how, being the head NCO in charge of the troops, what am I supposed to do to tell the guys to not cause problems like that and get involved in fistfights among your helpers and your friends, the guys that might save your life someday? And he said, I know the feeling. And so they had a order come through from the Pentagon. They said they would like to, anybody that wanted to volunteer for well, this was during the Korean War. No, yes, it was during the Korean War. Anyway, they said anybody that wanted to volunteer for armor or infantry could apply, and they might approve of it. Well, I applied. Sorry, we can't let you go. You have all too many security clearances. I had security clearances all the way up my arm. I mean, and they said that they were afraid that if I was captured, I might have to spill the beans on what I knew at the time. And it was a legal order. I thought it was a fair idea, but it didn't get me out of that outfit. So I told them, I said, well, if you won't send me back to Korea, then I'll just get out of the Army at the end of my hitch. And they said, sorry, we can't do anything about it. I said, well, I gave you your opportunity. So at the end of my hitch, I got out and went back to the States and walked down the street and saw the Air Force recruiting office. I walked in and here I am, can you use me? And they said, well, are you in the Army? I told them, yeah. They asked me how long. I told them 10 years. And they said, what'd you do in the Army? And I told them what I had done and what kind of work I had been doing. And they said, we'll take you. And I said, okay, let's talk about rank. So they said, well, what were you in the Army? And I said, a tech sergeant. And they said, we can give you a tech sergeant. I said, okay. Now let's talk about the time and grade. No, can't give you time and grade, but we can give you the same rank. So I took it and I went to work, took off the ODs and put on the blues. Smartest move I ever made. Because I found out that people actually in the armed forces of this country actually ate food and didn't dig holes and sleep in them. And actually slept in beds with sheets and washed themselves with towel and have water all the time to be able to wash themselves. I couldn't believe it, but the Air Force had all that, and I loved it.
Colonel Cohn, your post-war service, tell us about that, just fairly briefly.
Well, you know, before I was drafted, I didn't know what to do with myself. And all my friends were going to be engineers. So I took a summer term in college with ROTC, which I got an A. And I also took a math course and a physics course. I got a D in math and an F in physics. So I was on probation when I came back, but by then I knew I wasn't going to be an engineer. So I had been a staff sergeant when I was discharged, and I liked that. So there was a table to sign up for the reserve when we had discharged, and I signed it up because I could keep my rank and be in the reserve as a staff sergeant. Then when I graduated, I had taken ROTC, and I had received a regular Army commission. And you know, in that 1949, intelligence was still not a regular Army branch. It was still a reserve branch. So I couldn't go back to intelligence, and I had to get some closely aligned, and I chose military police. So I became a military policeman. And I stayed for a total of 35 years in the military and retired in '78. And then I went to work for the University of Maryland. And I wanted to start a personnel program because I had been in personnel also as a secondary type of a career. And they ran out of money after a year, but they wanted to keep me. And they said, how about managing our dormitory renovation program? Well, the irony of this is there would be engineers and architects working for me. I was the manager. And I never told them about my college career. But anyway, you never know what happens in your life. You think it's one way, and it ends up in another.
Talking about life, both of you are not young anymore, I might add. You're 100 years old now?
I'm 99.
99, sorry, but bad mistake. How dare
I'm not
I?
100
No,
yet.
sorry. Life lessons, Harry. What can you tell us about how to lead a good life? What is a good life to you?
Well, a good life with me is the life I've led. I think I've been very happy with what I've done. Everything I started out to do that I wanted to do, I took it exactly as far as I wanted to. Some things I even went a little beyond. So I've been very happy with everything I've gotten involved in. And I don't know what to lay that to, except I just accepted what I got. You have to remember I was a kid that had to quit school because my mother and father had died, and I had no chance of ever going to a military school, which is what I wanted to do. But I figured, well, if I can get in the Army, that's what the career I'll take. And I had planned on going in for 20, and I stayed in for 22. And when I was in, I accomplished everything that they assigned me to. I enjoyed it, and I ended up even further along in the field that I was working in communications, than I had ever thought I'd even get into. And I had some very exciting things happen. I did a lot of inspection work, and I worked with a lot of high-ranking officers. And the thing I liked about the whole thing was, after I changed over to the Air Force especially, I found out that the officers there were entirely different than they were in the Army for various reasons. I mean, we didn't have to live with a gun on our shoulder all the time in the Air Force. But the Air Force, I found the officers were much more decent guys. I mean, I liked them. I don't mean that the Army guys were indecent by any chance, but the officers I enjoyed working with because I was no longer Sergeant Miller, now I was Harry Miller. And they would say, hey, Harry, you ready? We want to go? You want to go with us to do such and such? Yeah, sure. That's the way we were in the Air Force. It was more of a camaraderie thing, I think, than the Army was. At least I saw it that way. And I know that the Army will tell you that they don't want anything to do with the Air Force because they don't have it rough or anything. Well, that's the reason I liked it, because it wasn't rough. I mean, that's exactly what I was trying to get out of.
Colonel Cohn, born a German Jew before the rise of Nazism, you fought for the US, you liberated Europe and your own country from untold evil. What's the good life to you? What is a good life to you?
What's a good life for me?
Yeah.
Well, of course, any life away from hate is a good life. That's the first thing. Now, I came in a deficit on the gene pool. My father died of a heart attack at age 60. My mother died of a stroke at age 62. And when I retired from the Army at age 54, I started to have high blood pressure. But I had medications they didn't have those medications. And I very religiously took those medications. Secondly, I never smoked, and I was moderate on alcohol and had to cut that out when the medication started. So no alcohol, no smoking. And then the next point was exercise. I knew about exercise, and ever since, well, I didn't have to worry about it in the Army. They took care of that. But after the Army, I started to jog in the well, right at the high school. They had a going around quarter of a mile, and I took 2 miles of jogging every morning. And then they were telling me when I get older, watch your knees, you can't jog anymore. So I started walking 2 miles. And to this day, I still have a stretching exercise every morning, and I walk to get my food. I have to go almost a quarter of a mile, and that adds up, and so I'm doing lots of walking. All that, the clean living, what not to eat and do is probably more important than what you eat. And also, the exercise is extremely important, and I do that. And here I am in 99. What can I say?
Well, I want to finish off by saying that you guys belong to what's being described as the greatest generation. I know that sometimes you feel a little bit uncomfortable about being described in such hyperbolic terms, but we like to think of you as the greatest generation. I want to say on behalf of Friends of the National World War II Memorial and the National Archives, thank you so much for being with us this evening. You define, both of you, the good life, which I would, in other words, say is a life of great service to this country. Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you.